Well, all right. Welcome back to As It Should Be YouTube channel. This is Paul Berlino here, and I'm going to continue on Bee Gees week, and kind of stealing this bit from Listography, the great Listography YouTube channel. Now, Joe, Jason, and Kramzer, one of the greatest, arguably the greatest music YouTube channel out there. Do go check them out, and in fact, their videos are way better than mine. So if you like this stuff, you're gonna love them. But yeah, I decided, to do a Bee Gees week. I just did the ranking of the albums on Monday, and well, today I am going to rank my top 20 favorite Bee Gees songs. I almost said singles, but just songs. Just wherever they could be, deep tracks, they could be anything. So initially, I made a sort of a long director's cut list of tracks, kind of went through all the albums, went through the singles, and just everything, and made my list of all the songs that I like most, which came to more than 20. And so I have a few honorable mentions here that I want to mention because they're honorable. Well, let's see, what do we have? Holiday from Bee Gees First, didn't quite make the list, deserved to, but did not. In the Morning from the Melody soundtrack. Sorry, no glasses again. What are you going to do? Yeah, from the Melody soundtrack from 1971, In the Morning. What a great track. I mean, anyway, didn't make the list, should have. And Love So Right, fantastic single from Children of the World. Another one that came this close. And then, beyond that, 3 really fantastic 1966 tracks, one of which was actually a single back in their Australia days, back in the days when only Australia knew about them, and that's Coleman, Exit Stage Left, or Stage Right, sorry. Exit Stage Right, and I Want Home. Alright, so let's get right into the songs, because I don't want this video to be 8 years long, and neither do you. So, coming at number 20 is the great single, Too Much Heaven. Yeah, okay, so now this is, ultimately this was on Spirits Having Flown, but originally it came out way ahead of the album. It came out kind of as its own thing, like a standalone single, late in 1978. And it's something that they recorded to benefit the Music for UNICEF Fund. And it went to number 1, of course. This was part of a long string of 6 singles in a row that went number 1 with the Bee Gees in the latter half of the 70s. Yeah, they wrote this song the same day as they wrote Tragedy and Shadow Dancing. So this is where they were at this point. I mean, these guys basically were just shitting out great songs by this point. Like in one day, Too Much Heaven, Shadow Dancing, and Tragedy. There you go. That's where they are. And the Chicago horn section plays on this. Yeah. So there you go. Okay, so number 19 I have Run to Me, which is the opening track on the 1972 album To Whom It May Concern. That was a pretty sizable hit at the time. I mean, it went top 20 in the US, and, well, it's gone top 20 for me, too, on my list, so there you go. Okay, so coming in at number 18 is another great single. Now, this isn't all going to be singles, guys. There's going to be some deep cuts on here, but there's also going to be a lot of great singles, because their singles are great. Well, this is Tragedy. Yeah, Tragedy is the opening track on Spirits Having Flown from 1979. And, man, I remember when this record came out. So great, so great. And I was in elementary school at the time. I was 9. And I remember being in traffic patrol. And my best friend at the time was Maury Martin. Hey there, Maury. I haven't seen Maury since school, so I don't know. I don't even know if he's alive. But, hey, shout out to Maury. And we were both in traffic patrol, and I just remember one day us being at our respective corners with our stop signs, and a car drove by blasting Tragedy. Tragedy was just blasting out the window, and I just remember looking across the street and seeing Maury dancing with his stop sign. And no major story. That's just when I think of that song, I just think of Maury dancing on the corner with his stop sign doing traffic patrol with Tragedy blasting out of a car driving by. So there you go. Okay, so coming in at number 17 is yet another huge single, Stayin' Alive. Yeah, from like I even need to tell you this, from the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. Now, Robert Stigwood had wanted them to do a song called Saturday Night for the movie, right? And at this point, the movie was still being worked on, and it still was just called Saturday Night, and the band was still working on songs. And the Bee Gees were dead set against having a song called Saturday Night, because there were already 8,000 songs called Saturday Night, not the least of which was the pretty recent Bay City Rollers smash, right? So, yeah, so they pretty much talked Stigwood out of that, and he decided to take Night Fever, the song Night Fever, and put that at the end of it, and they called it Saturday Night Fever. And that's where that title came from. But Staying Alive, I mean, it's pretty low on the list. I mean, 17, that's pretty damn low. And I have to admit that that's probably just because it's just so... There's a burnout factor. It's just so ubiquitous and just seems like such an... seems like an obvious kind of choice kind of thing. But I mean, really, honestly, it deserves to be way, way higher. I mean, it deserves to be top 5, really, but I just can't do it. Okay, number 16, yet another huge single. Number 1 single, because that's just how the Bee Gees rolled in the later 70s. Well, this is You Should Be Dancing. Now, this comes off the Children of the World album, the opening track, and, of course, the track went to number 1, and it was ultimately included on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. They actually threw that in there as well, as a bonus, I guess. It was in the movie. It's one of the great scenes in the movie, one of the great dance scenes. And, well, you know, I only just learned this. Stephen Stills sat in on percussion on this track, and you know, Stephen Stills has a little bit of a Latin influence. You know, he's an LA guy, and he's the one that kind of brings that Latin percussion flavor on that song. Okay, so coming in at number 15, not a huge single. This is Trafalgar. Yeah, I talked about Trafalgar on my Ranking the Albums video, the title track to their 1971 album, and you know, it's a Morris Gibb vocal, Morris Gibb song, a Morris Gibb tour de force, in fact, you know, heavily Beatles-influenced ballad, and it was one of my early favorites. When I was first really starting to get into this pre-disco Bee Gees stuff, this was a real standout track for me. It's kind of leveled off a bit, that's why I have it this low, but honestly, if you'd asked me, you know, in the mid-90s to rank these songs, this would have been like probably top 5. But, yeah, now it's merely at number 15. Okay, so coming at number 14 is Don't Want to Live Inside Myself, which is actually the next track on Trafalgar after the track Trafalgar. And it's the follow-up single to How Can You Mend a Broken Heart. How Can You Mend a Broken Heart had been a number 1 single. Trafalgar, you know, it's sort of a Beatlesque dirge, really, and a great one. It only reached number 53, and that's a damn shame, because it is a great, great song. Alright, so coming in at number 13 is Portrait of Louise. Now, this is the second track on 2 Years On album, the 1970 2 Years On album, and it's a, you know, it's a melodic, folky, orchestral kind of mid-tempo, kind of ballady, but kind of mid-tempo, and man, this has been one of my very favorites for decades, and it really, it's evergreen. I never tire of it. Okay, so coming in at number 12 is Sir Geoffrey Saved the World. Yeah, now this is the B-side to the World single. World is the opening track on Horizontal and was one of the singles from that album. Sir Geoffrey Saved the World is a non-album B-side, and man, what a song. I mean, I can't believe that they just relegated this thing to a B-side. It's better, really, honestly, in my opinion, than most of the Horizontal album. It should have been on that album. And I think it should have been the A side of the single. Okay, so coming in at number 11 is Please Read Me from the great Bee Gees' first album. If you watch my ranking of the albums, you know that that comes in pretty high on the list, but I'll let you watch the video. But now this is a really great atmospheric psych ballad with lyrics about an introvert who wishes for people to wishes for you to read his mind rather than having to articulate his thoughts, and that's kind of how I interpret the lyrics, at least. And man, always been one of my favorites. Number 10 brings us to another really great single, a hit, but not on the level of those 70s hits. This is I've Got to Get a Message to You. This comes from the Idea album from 1968, and I first kind of got. It first really kind of came to my attention. I think I'd heard it before, but it first really kind of seeped into my psyche, brain, whatever, when I saw them do it in the 70s on Midnight Special. that live rendition with their live vocals, it just sounded so good. And it sounded very familiar to me when I heard it, because I had heard it, I just didn't realize. And yeah, it's always been one of my very favorite Bee Gees songs, and I think it should have been a much, much bigger hit. But it's in my top 10, so hey, there you go. There's proper kudos right there. Okay, so number 9 brings us to yet another blockbuster single, Night Fever, obviously from the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. Now, this is one of the songs they were actually recording for the follow-up album to Children of the World before they ended up giving their songs over to the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. And when they were in the studio when they were in the studio recording that record, or starting to record that album, Blue Weaver, who was the keyboard player, he was messing around with trying to do sort of a disco arrangement of Theme from a Summer Place. And Barry said, "What's that?" "It's a theme from the Summer Place." He goes, "No, it's not. We're going to do a song around this." And that's actually the intro sort of string part for Night Fever is based on that. And that's what started the song. And so who knew? Theme from a Summer Place is responsible for Night Fever. Okay, so coming in at number 8, yet another giant single. Those incorrigible Bee Gees and their giant singles. Well, this is Jive Talkin'. Now, this is from the Main Course album, the 1975 Main Course album, and this song came about because there was a rhythm. There was a bridge they would cross on their way into Miami to go into the studio when they were recording this album, and their car would make this sound, this rhythmic sound. And that's how they started the song. They just decided to do that, go into the studio and do that rhythm, and they wrote the whole song around it. And this ended up being a huge comeback hit for them, number 1. And, well, it started the huge classic late 70s Bee Gees phenomenon, really. This is where it begins, right here. Okay, and number 7, coming in at number 7, is actually the song that comes right before Jive Talkin' on the same album, the opening track on Main Course, Nights on Broadway. Yet another big single, and this is actually the song that introduces Barry's falsetto. It's not the first song where he sings falsetto in its entirety, but Ari had asked him if he could do kind of a scream. When you get towards the end of the song and it starts to build and they're doing the chorus over and over again, he wanted Barry to do like some high screams over that. And what ended up happening is Barry started doing these falsetto call and response vocals with the chorus, and that was the moment where he went, "Whoa, I didn't realize I had this voice." And then there you go. That's it. The beginning of the falsetto is here. For better or for worse, for some of you. Okay, so coming at number 6 is the great Charade. That's how they pronounce it in the song. So that's, when in Rome. I mean, charade, charade, whatever. So this is the opening track on the Mr. Natural album from 1974, the first album that R.F. Martin produced for them. And, this track is very adult contemporary, like very 1974 adult contemporary. It sounds like it would be on a 1974 afternoon soap opera or something. But it has like Fender Rhodes and strings and, of course, trademark harmonies, and it's just really a gorgeous, really kind of mellow ballad. And, the Bee Gees have a lot of mellow ballads, but this is a really standout one. It's especially, I think it's an especially beautiful one. But yeah, so there you go. Okay, so now we're at the top 5. My top 5 favorite Bee Gees tracks. And what coming in at number 5 is If I Only Had My Mind on Something Else. Yeah, now that's the opening track on the Cucumber Castle album from 1970, the one album that Barry and Morris did as a duo because Robin was out of the band. And it was actually a single. It was actually the last single that they put out before ultimately just disbanding because the whole duo thing just wasn't working out. And they went and they did a bunch of solo stuff. Like Robin did a solo album, Robin's Reign, which came out. Barry recorded a solo album called The Kid's No Good, which didn't come out. And Morris recorded a solo album called The Loner, which didn't come out. And actually, it's really too bad that those two albums didn't come out, especially Morris's, because Morris's is just unbelievable. The Loner, if you guys don't have that, look, it's a the bootleg is out there. Phenomenal. And the thing about these 3 solo albums is that it really kind of spells out what each guy brings to the table. Robin's album. Well, Robin, he really brings sort of the dramatic, operatic, Baroque sort of influences, and Barry brings the folky and soulful influences, and Morris, he's the one who brings the Beatles influences. Yeah, he's really heavy on the Beatles influence, and his solo album is the only one out of the three that really has that heavy Beatles influence that a lot of those Bee Gees albums of that time have. Like, he's the guy who's bringing that. And now this single really wasn't much of a hit, and that's too bad, because it is a phenomenal track. It's a gorgeous track, and it's my number 5. Okay, so coming in at number 4, How Deep Is Your Love? Oh, what a song! What a song! I didn't really like this song much as a kid. When Saturday Night Fever was new, I really kind of gravitated towards the upbeat, dancey stuff. How Deep Is Your Love was just sort of boring, ballad adult stuff. And, well, obviously I have it at number 4. It's one of my very favorites now. I mean, I have it way above Staying Alive. That wouldn't have been the case when I was a kid. And, but man, it's the last song that appears in the film. It's at the end of the last scene, and it goes over the credits. And, it's funny because I remember as a kid, I had a friend, Maury Martin. I mentioned Maury Martin from the tragedy, from the stop sign, right? Well, his family was really religious. And I remember him claiming that the Bee Gees, that their genre of music was religious, that they did religious music. And I didn't know what that word meant, so I just thought, oh, okay, because I didn't know, I don't think I knew the word disco, and I certainly didn't know R&B and soul. And this actually brings me, I'm going to, as an aside, on my Ranking the Albums video, I mentioned that I was going to always say disco with quotes, and that I would explain later. I never explained later, so I'm going to explain now. I don't think the Bee Gees are disco. I don't think the Bee Gees made disco. They made soul and R&B records. That's it. It's just disco was the huge thing on the scene, and so that's what it got pigeonholed as, but those are not disco records. Anyway, so... But just the same, I didn't know the term disco quite yet, and I didn't know the term soul or R&B. I didn't know what kind of music these Bee Gees tracks were. And Maury said, it's religious music. And I thought that just meant like the upbeat, dancey tracks. And so I thought, well, How Deep Is Your Love then is not religious music, because it's just a slow song, right? That's not religious music, i.e. it's not a dance track. It's one of the more nostalgic ones for me, I think. This really, really takes me back to that moment in time, and yeah, not enough can be said about this song, and I don't need to describe it. You all know it. Great, great song. How Deep Is Your Love? Okay, coming in at number 3 is another great ballad, but not a famous one, not a single by any stretch. This is I Can Bring Love. Now, this is from the To Whom It May Concern album, and this was an older song Barry had that he'd written for something else that he brought into this album, and it's totally solo Barry. Total just acoustic, just Barry by himself singing with an acoustic guitar. Some strings come in a little later, but there's no drums, there's no harmonies, and man, I have it at number 3. I mean, this is one of my very, very favorite Bee Gees songs, and it's a gorgeous one. I mean, if you don't know this song, go look it up, because it gets me right here. Okay, so number 2 brings us to yet another great ballad. The Bee Gees have so many great ballads, and this one was a single. I think in some countries it was an A-side, but I think in most it was a B-side. Great track. Kilburn Towers. Now, Kilburn Towers is from the Idea album from 1968, and, well, Kilburn Towers themselves are, that's a pair of circular apartment towers in Sydney that he wrote about, and they're kind of similar to the Yankee Hotel Foxtrot cylindrical towers that they have in Chicago, right? And this track is just gorgeous. It's cinematic. Morris played a lot of Mellotron on the track, and it's just really just it just takes me to like this dreamy place that I love. All of my favorite music takes me to this dreamy place, and yeah, and it takes this song to number 2 on my list. Okay, so my number one favorite Bee Gees song. More Than a Woman. Yes, More Than a Woman is my very favorite Bee Gees song. I cannot love this track more. I loved it from the moment I heard it. I remember when I got the record as a kid, I hadn't heard the song. I hadn't heard it on the radio. The movie wasn't out yet, so I hadn't heard it in the movie. I just heard it as an album track, and just instantly it was as good as anything else on the record. And, well, for my money, it's better than anything else on the record or any of their other records. And there were also two versions of the song on the album. There was a Tavares version, which really, honestly, I love just as much. I can't really decide between the two. Love both of those versions, but as far as Bee Gees tracks, this is it, my number one. I don't have to tell you anything about this. You've heard it a million times. You know the song. You had the album. It's More Than a Woman by the Bee Gees. And, you know, one of my favorite tracks of all time. Okay, so there you go. That's my top 20 Bee Gees tracks. I kind of rushed through this a bit because I thought it was going to end up getting long, and that the video was going to end up being, you know, an hour and a half or whatever, like one of my audio podcasts. And so it may seem a little rushed, but, you know, now you have time to go do other stuff. Now you have time to go watch the listography videos, like I was telling you. So, so like, subscribe, click the little bell, comment, all that good stuff. Comment on the YouTube thread if you could. I have friends who go and they comment on my Facebook postings, and I really appreciate that, and I love you guys. But please go to YouTube and comment, because that's really, really where it counts. And but honestly, when in the end, I just like hearing from you, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's from YouTube, whatever. I appreciate all the views, and I appreciate the subscribers. They've been increasing lately, and you know, the numbers aren't high yet, but I still appreciate it all. My goal is to try to get to 100. Yes, 100 subscribers, because I want to do sort of as a 100 subscribers special. I want to do ranking the Beatles albums. Yeah, and something else. I have 2 special videos I want to do when I get to 100 subscribers. So subscribe, everybody, so you can see those great videos. And I'll see you next time. Jesus fucking Christ, I keep doing this. What do I keep doing this for? Oh, Jesus motherfucking Christ, what is wrong with me?